Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We're continuing with readings from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And we're going to read a little essay called The True Self of Human Beings.
Okay. The true self of man. When all the desires that live in the mind are given up, then the man is said to be of steady wisdom. And at that time he lives perfectly satisfied within himself. Desires reside in the mind and not in the soul. So Krishna says that when a man gives up the desires that live in the mind, he attains wisdom. The mind is always restless because of these desires. But when it gets rid of all desires, then alone the self can be realized. The mind has been compared to the surface of a lake. If the surface is disturbed by waves and ripples, the trees and clouds and other objects are imperfectly reflected. But if the surface is calm and clear, then every object is distinctly mirrored on it. Similarly, when the surface of the mind is calm and clear, the self is perfectly reflected. You stand beside a lake. The waters are stirred by the wind. You do not see your true image. It's distorted and broken in outline. The same way, the mind is ruffled. It gives only a false and vague picture of the self. When, however, all desires have left it, when it becomes calm, the true self will be clearly seen, and you will know your own glory. That time you will see that you cannot die, and cannot be overpowered by ignorance, that you are naturally Sat Chit Ananda, eternally existent, all-knowing, and blissful. Desires cannot exist in the self, for it is full and complete. Desire means want. Because we are hungry, we need food. Because we are thirsty, we want water. But the self needs nothing, so it is wantless, and therefore has no desire.
Yes, and of course, if you're lucky enough to be near a lake that's that calm, then you can see the reflections. You can see visual images on the internet, or perhaps you've taken pictures on vacations where beautiful snow-capped mountains are reflected in a lake, or pictures of the Taj Mahal being reflected in the reflecting pool. So these are good examples of when you have a very still body of water that you're going to reflect an image. And of course, we deliberately put reflecting pools in front of great buildings because we want that effect, because it's so beautiful. Another analogy would be, think of a swimming pool, which most people that live in a city and don't get out much might be more familiar with. If you have a swimming pool and you've got some sort of toy in the bottom of the swimming pool, before you jump into the swimming pool, you can clearly see it, and there's no difficulty. It looks just like it's supposed to look. But if you start jumping into the pool and creating a lot of waves, then somebody else looking down to the bottom of the pool just sees a bunch of gibbery lines that just make no sense at all. There's no way to tell what it is you're looking at. And so that's really the idea here. And of course, one thing that we often recommend in stilling the mind is that it's very difficult to get rid of all desires and get rid of all thoughts and so forth. So what we often do is replace our thoughts with a mantra. And the mantra helps us to not think of other things. And so I liken that into taking a stick and just dipping it very gently into the water so that the ripples on the pool are completely uniform, and you can still see the object at the bottom. It may be a little bit distorted, but it won't be nearly as distorted as it is when people are jumping in and out of the pool. So the mantra calms the mind down to a point where you can see what's at the bottom of that, the lake of your mind or the swimming pool of your mind. Once you get to a certain point of steadiness, then the fact that you can see something down there begins to hold your attention. And so that's the trick in meditation. Once you've gotten a glimpse of the object, when the mind is relatively calm, then it's much easier to proceed forward. All right, let's continue.
What is mind? Mind is one with me, but it is not I. Mind is the root of all the senses. The senses and organs of action are only able to work through the mind. It is the instrument by the help of which the soul is able to gather up all experiences. It's able to think and will and feel. This is the function of the mind. If we analyze our desires, we shall find that they are all in the mind. Desires are of two kinds: desires to avoid and desires to acquire. A man desires to avoid what does not harmonize with his mind, and to acquire that which does harmonize. Then all pleasurable and painful experiences come from the mind. Without the mind, there could be no desire, because the mind brings the self in contact with the world. Desire always implies an object. It is a transitive verb. A man always desires something, and something which is to be found in the world. So all desires arise not in the soul, but in the world and in the mind.
Yeah, and of course, this points out the other difficulty that we're trying to get over is we're trying to get over being in this world of dualities. And this whole world of dualities is created with this impression that I'm a subject and everything else is an object. And so we're trying to reduce that idea. So one way to do that is to reduce your desires, because those are desires for things that are external, those things out there, objects. If you realize that you are one with everything, then you couldn't possibly desire anything. There isn't anything else to desire because you are already one with everything. So this is another way of looking at the problem. Oh, another thing I was going to mention is this Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, that we mentioned in the previous paragraph. That's the positive way of trying to describe the indescribable Brahman. Brahman is beyond our words, but we can indicate the nature of Brahman with these three qualities. Existence, the nature of absolute existence, not the existence of something, but the existence itself. Consciousness, or knowledge, and again, not the consciousness of something, because that would be an object, but the absolute consciousness itself. And bliss. Again, not bliss about anything that you have, but simply bliss itself. The three negative ways of describing Brahman are the infinite, in other words, it's not finite, the undivided, it's not divided, and the unchanging, it's not changing. So that's the negative way of describing the indescribable Brahman. All right, let's go do the next paragraph.
So long as a man cannot separate himself from his body and mind, so long he does not know the art of drawing himself from these. He will have to be restless and to suffer, for his desires will increase more and more as he satisfies them. By satisfaction of desire, no man has ever been able to quench them. The more he yields to them, the more they will burn him. So only one who knows the secret of separating himself from mind and body, and thus getting rid of all desires, can be called a truly wise man. It is our daily experience that when we fall asleep, at that moment, we go away from body and mind. We forget who we are, who our Father is, where we live. But are we disassociated from all that belongs to us in the world? How is it? We're still in the body. We've not left it, yet we do not see or hear. The body is like a very big building. The owner sleeps near the gate. He hears the least cry. But if he's in a distant corner, he does not hear unless the call is very loud. So when a man sleeps soundly, he goes far from the gateways of the senses. He also goes far from the inner gateway of the mind. And if you want him, you must give a loud call. Yet, he is always there. He's not left this house of the body. Thus we learn from sleep, the soul is distinct from body and mind. When the man sleeps, he does not die. He's only gone far inside himself, beyond the senses, even beyond the mind. Because if he were still in mind, he would remember, feel, and think. If we analyze a man in sleep, we can say that he is not in the legs, he's not in the arms, and not in the brain or in the senses. Yet he must be somewhere inside. It's said that he is in the heart, and the brain, the muscles, and the whole organism is still under his command. When he leaves the body, all action ceases. The brain is injured, the man may live for some time in a demented condition, but if the heart is injured even a little, the life stops at once, because it is the center of life.
You know, this reminds me of reports of people that have had near-death experiences, and where they've experienced themselves outside of their body. And often this will happen in a hospital setting where they're undergoing surgery of some sort. And people report that they feel that they're floating somewhere at the ceiling of the room looking down, and their body is in an object. And many times they'll report that they don't feel connected to the body. They recognize it as a body they used to inhabit, but they don't seem to be attached to it, and they don't seem to be concerned about the things in the world or the things they had. They do experience a certain level of detachment from all these things that are normally very attractive to us. And yet eventually, for some reason, the desire to, or the imperative to get back into the body is there, and then they re-enter the body, and then, of course, they can report about these experiences later. But anyway, briefly, they've had this experience of being dissociated from the body. And they often report that thinking just sort of happens. It doesn't really happen in words like we often think in our normal state, but it's simply a consciousness of something that is going on. And so it's not like people talk to you or in this state, or that you're thinking words in this state. It's just a state of knowingness. And that's why it's sometimes difficult for them to put these things into words, because they didn't experience it. Sometimes they didn't experience it to begin with in terms of words. But this just gives you a glimpse of this idea. Of course, I wouldn't say they're in samadhi at this point. They haven't had to do spiritual practice to get into this state. It's a different mode of experience, but it does indicate that our consciousness is not connected to the body and the mind. And when it disconnects and is operating independently of the body and the mind, normally it operates through the body and the mind. That's the way we experience it all the time. But if in these brief instances, either in very deep meditation or in these extraordinary near-death type of experiences, then they experience this detachment. So lucid dreaming is a little similar in that people that have lucid dreams feel a certain disconnection, and they realize that they can be in charge of things from a different level than they would be if they were completely connected with the body and mind in the normal sense. So, all right, let's continue here.
If desires are in the mind and not in the soul is wantless, calm, and perfect. Because it is perfect, it must be full, complete. Everyone longs to be perfect and complete. Who of us does not wish to be rich? Why? Because we think that we shall be free from want. But ask a rich man if he has wants, and you will find that he has many. The richer the man, the more wants he has. And the poorer he is, because want means poverty. So when you find that wealth brings more wants, you say, this is not the path. You try some other. In this way you learn at last that perfection is nowhere outside. You are the perfect being. Perfection is within you. That is the reason you could not find it outside yourself. But who is it that is searching? Who is this I? Is it the I who hungers, thirsts, and has so many imperfections in it? Who is this I? And who is that I who is full and perfect?
Oh, I should have stopped you earlier. Yeah, so this reminds me of the stories and things that we've always experienced where you can't find something. You can't find your glasses, and then you discover they're right on top of your head. Or you can't find your watch, and you discover you've already put it on. And this is analogous to this searching outside when something's not outside. It's right there within you. And so that's a reminder of the fact that the true things that we're looking for are not outside, but it is inside. All right, let's go on now. Who this I is.
Man wants to be happy, but this want is not in the self, because it is happiness itself. The ordinary man wants to be wise, but there is no such want in the self, because it is wisdom itself. Hence, this I, who hungers and thirsts, cannot be the self. But the great ones say, thou art that. And what do they mean? How can this weak man, who is a Hindu or a Christian, or needs food and drink, who suffers and enjoys, how can he be that perfect one? Yet the Vedas say this I is that. Did the Vedas commit a blunder? No, we must not misunderstand their meaning. They do not mean that this weak, forlorn, ephemeral being known as Mr. So-and-so is that perfect, infinite one. A Hindu may have committed a murder, and in order to escape, he disguises himself as a foreigner. But he's caught, brought up before the court. He's not dressed like the man who committed the murder. He's not the same name. There are many other differences. The detective sees that the cut of the features, the height, the manner, resemble those of the murderer. So he overlooks the dissimilarities and dwells on the points of similarity. And by this means, he's able to find out that this is the man who committed the murder. We must do that in the same way. Of course, the finite cannot resemble the infinite. Here, I am garbed in finite dress. God is garbed in an infinite dress. So we must throw out the dress and dwell on points of resemblance. I'm conscious, and he is conscious. I'm distinguished from the universe around me because I have the power to know. Therefore, I differ more from the universe than from him because I'm conscious. Overlooking the dissimilarities in dress, therefore, I then see that we are alike in being conscious. Hence, we must be one in consciousness. because there is only one consciousness.
Of course, this reminds you of the metaphor that this is a great drama. It's the drama of Mahamaya, the great dramatist. And she has created this drama out of the infinite oneness, making it all look like a multiplicity and made up of all sorts of dualities. And so we have become these characters in this drama. And the analogy, of course, works well with a real drama. You take on a persona when you take on a part in a drama. And if you're a really good actor, you take on that persona very fully when you step on stage. You're dressed in the costume, you speak in the dialect, and the nuances of the person that you're trying to portray as the actor. And you may commit murders, and you may fall madly in love with somebody, or become very distraught about something, or become very elated about something. All of these things are things that you might do in this drama. And then you step off the stage and you take off the costume, and then you're just plain old you again. And so you've been through this whole scenario and done all sorts of things as part of the drama. So that's what our true self is, the Atman. The Atman has been assigned a particular role in this drama, and we're trying to act it out. The difficulty is we've forgotten that we're just an actor. We've forgotten we're the Atman, and we think that this drama is the reality, and so that is our difficulty. So the true self has not undergone any change. It just is appearing to go through all these changes. And our goal here is to realize it. And I think we've mentioned this many times before, which is now a very old movie, The Truman Story, where this little boy is raised on a TV set. And everybody else knows that this is just a TV set and that they're all actors playing parts. But he doesn't, and he grows up that way. And he finally gets enough clues to realize that this is just a super big movie studio, and he breaks free. So that's what we try to do. We have to try to break free of this spell of Maya that we've been put under, that tells us we're part of this great drama that we can't get out of. Okay, so that's our goal, is to get out of it. Everybody here in Hollywood's trying to get into it. They're all taking it down here at the tunnel is a favorite spot for people to get their mug shots. The cameramen and the wannabe actors are down there, and they're taking all these shots. They're putting on all these different costumes. Now I'm the tough guy. Now I'm the romantic guy. Now I'm the clown. And so they take all these different shots of all these different kind of personas they could play, and they send it out to all the agents and hope to get into the drama. Well, we're trying to do just the opposite, trying to get out of it. All right, let's go on.
Can a beautiful dead body in which a man or woman lived a few hours back, can it see or hear? No. Why? Because it is not conscious. So consciousness is different from seeing and hearing. It is the basis of all sense perception. Consciousness enables me to see and hear. And this power of consciousness in me is the same as the power of consciousness in you. Sights may be many, sounds may be many, but the consciousness which enables us to see and hear cannot be differentiated. It is always the same, just as gold cannot be distinguished from gold. Wherever there is consciousness, there will be united action. That is the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is that power with the help of which the eyes are able to see, the ears to hear, the tongue to taste. Not any special eyes or ears or tongue, but all eyes and ears and tongues throughout the universe. Hence, if you know one part of consciousness, You know all. But the desires which arise from sight, sound, taste, touch have nothing to do with consciousness.
Yeah, it's interesting that these sense organs are connected to the 5 elements of antiquity, and the 5 elements of antiquity is not just a primitive way of trying to understand matter. It's actually much deeper than that. It's actually showing that things are made up of energies, because the sense organs are sensitive to different kinds of energy. Your eyes are sensitive to radiation energy. Your tongue is sensitive to bases and acids, chemical energies, and which is electrical energy. And your nose is, interestingly enough, sensitive to magnetic energies. It's the magnetic dipole bonds in the molecules, which your nose senses. Your ears pick up gravity. I know most people think it picks up sound. It does that too, but it's primary. If you go back anatomically, the ear's earliest function in the animals that preceded us was sensing gravity, and your skin is sensitive to kinetic energy, and so your 5 senses are sensitive to the 5 energies in the universe. And of course, we now know that E equals mc squared, and everything is made up of energy. And so that was the incredibly mystic way that the early seers were able to interpret this universe, and that we have these 5 senses that sense these 5 kinds of energies. And that's how we experience this universe. If we had another kind of sense, we could pick up a different kind of energy if there were one. Well, there's nuclear energy. I don't know quite how you'd pick that up unless there were bombs going off. But anyway, so we have these 5 sense organs, and they're bringing in all this information, and it's energy they're bringing in. It's the energies of all these different things that are coming into us. We're sensing all these energies with these 5 organs, and that's how we get all of our information. And the consciousness is our ability for the brain to interpret all these incoming energies into some sort of sensible picture. Okay, let's go on.
The moment I shall be deprived of this consciousness, I shall fall down dead. The instant it leaves me, I shall cease to be. I only live because I'm consciousness. But as Mr. So-and-so, I'm not always conscious. When I fall asleep, I forget completely whether I'm a Brahman or a non-Brahman. So at that time, Mr. So-and-so has gone to sleep. There is undoubtedly an inner consciousness that does not sleep, because when we wake up, we remember that we have existed before. And remembering means that while we were asleep, we were experiencing what we are now remembering. Memory is based upon past experience. So if we remember that we've been asleep, we must have experienced sleep. Who is this that experiences? It is not the outer self who thinks itself a Brahman or non-Brahman, a man or a woman, old or young, because at that time the sleeper did not know what his form or condition was. But he remembers that he has been asleep. That which remembers is not this I, but that consciousness which is above this formless condition. It is that universal formless consciousness which is one with the infinite universal consciousness.
Yes, and it's not our thoughts, and it's not even the way we're perceiving the universe. We know that people can have altered states of consciousness through drugs or through some sort of mental illness or imbalance in the brain, and they end up having different impressions of the universe. They see things differently. And so it's not the information coming into our brains from the outside world. that is who we are. We're that screen of consciousness that's behind all of this, the ultimate consciousness. As we say, Sat Chit Ananda. Chit is that consciousness itself, not the consciousness of something. And so it's that consciousness itself that exists in dreamless sleep. It's not conscious of anything. It's just consciousness itself. All right.
In this way, we must reason and understand that when the Vedas say, I am that, they do not mean this ephemeral self is that, not the part which is a Hindu, because in the next life, the same one may be a Christian. This is not that. But behind this fleeting ephemeral self is a permanent self, which is one without a second. The ocean is one. On the surface, innumerable waves and ripples and bubbles play, but beneath them lies one vast body of water. Similarly, there may be many ripples of consciousness, many bubbles, many waves of consciousness. But take away these ripples, waves, and bubbles, and you will find one changeless consciousness. Well, what is this ripple, wave, bubble side of me? This little self, this little Mr. So-and-so, this Brahman. But take away these, and I am one calm, universal, eternal self. Beyond all these, that self abides. On this eternal self rise the bubbles of ephemeral existence, but beyond dwells the indestructible, unchangeable one.
Yeah, I suspect that Swami Ramakrishnananda had an audience that had a lot of South Indian Brahmins in it. He was in the South, and of course the Brahmins in South India are highly educated and very well versed in scriptures. But of course Ramakrishna's take on all of this would have been a good revelation for them to begin to tie things together in a clearer way. So I suspect that many of the people that were listening to this were Brahmins, and that's why he keeps talking about being a Brahmin when you fall asleep and so forth, because he's probably talking to that kind of an audience. But we get the picture. It doesn't matter who you're identifying yourself as, and in this country we don't have that idea of being a Brahmin or being a Kshatriya or being something else. But we all have identities as being some sort of occupation, some sort of gender, some sort of hobbyist, and what our educational background is, and so forth. So these are the things that we tend to identify with. And so we all have these identities that we have wrapped around ourselves, but we are that core of consciousness that is unchangeable. All of these other things, of course, change. And you just look back on yourself and you realize that the you that you identified as this little kid going to school is very different from the person who had to go out and look for jobs. And if you're old enough to be retired, it's the person that's retired is not the same as the person that did all these other things, and yet there is something that's the same. That Atman that's resided in all of these different situations remains the same. All right.
Where can rest be found so long as the eternal wind of desire is blowing, stirring up froth and bubbles and waves on the surface of the mind? Whoever will seek to find rest, peace, calmness in this ever-changing world is a madman. If you want to realize perfection, it is somewhere else. There are no ripples or bubbles in your eternal self. God, the all-wise, all-perfect being, has been described as consciousness. He is not dead, lifeless matter. Consciousness must be searched in consciousness. Just as you must seek darkness in darkness, light in light. Therefore, you want to realize the all-conscious being. If you want to find your beloved, you must search in your consciousness. If you wish to realize God, you must go deeper and deeper within. Only there will you find Him. Blessed is the man who has learnt this secret. Inside the self of mine is the true self to be found. Not outside. It is foolishness to search for Him elsewhere than in consciousness. You must seek being in being, life in life. This is the temple of God. You must take the suggestion from the outer temples and search for God in the innermost shrine. Wise men of the past realized this and built these outer temples to show man how he must go from enclosure to enclosure of organism until in the innermost shrine you'll find God seated. But to reach that shrine, you must pass beyond all other courts.
So, of course, the ultimate realization, once you've realized what your true nature is, it doesn't mean that you won't be necessarily required to live in the world, but you will be like the actor that remembers who he is, and he's going to walk off stage, and you can act a much better role in that sense if you know that your true self is not undergoing all these hardships and changes and trials and difficulties. You can live with a bit more detachment and equal-mindedness and react to things with greater consciousness rather than less consciousness. So it's not implying here that you're simply going to stop doing everything and just sit and meditate for the rest of your life, but that you'll reach a state of consciousness where you can be in the world but not of the world, as the saying goes. So that's the goal, is to have that consciousness so that you can live in the world but not be of the world. All right.
Suppose there is a wall with many things hanging on it. If you give up the wall, then you will have to give up everything on it. This body is like such a wall. But the moment you are able to give it up, that is, give up all attachment to it, you will give up all that is resting or hanging on it. Now, what are the things on this wall? These two eyes are the two nails on which all forms are hanging. These two ears are the nails on which all sounds are hanging. This tongue is the nail on which all tastes are hanging. And so with the sense organs and organs of action. Therefore, to give up the body means giving up all these. To give up the mind means to give up memory or the record of past experience. That is, you will give up one small family, one country, name, one special caste or creed. This is how at last the man sees nothing but his self. The moment that he gives up body and mind, he will also give up the world. When body and mind are given up, what is there? The one eternal self.
Okay, keep going.
Have you lost something? No, you've lost nothing. Yes, you have lost all worries, troubles, and anxieties. What have you gained? You have realized all that you've been so long searching for. You have realized happiness. You have realized peace. You have realized power. You have realized freedom. You've gained all the things for which you've been struggling from time without beginning. So your fruitless attempts, through all your races of many lives attempts, which have been like those of a man journeying to touch the horizon, or to find a mirage, have now borne fruit. You have touched the horizon. You wanted to be all-powerful, and here you are all-powerful. You wanted to be calm and peaceful. But here is calmness and peace for you. You wanted to know all, and you've become all-knowing. Thus you have got all that for which you have been struggling for.
And of course, we have great examples of how to to live in the world after you've experienced this oneness. Just look at the examples of all the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and how they lived and carried on relief work. They ran the order. They, like Vivekananda, went all over the world lecturing. And you look at Vivekananda's life, and he could be perfectly be happy with nothing, not knowing where the next meal was going to come from, or living with some very wealthy person, some in New York or London or Boston, and being treated like royalty, and then living with somebody with very simple means, like when he came out here and lived with Mrs. Blodgett in LA in a very modest home. Then he moved to the Mead Sisters in South Pasadena, where there were, how many people? 5, 6, 7, how many? There were about 6 or 7 people living in this tiny house, which is a monument now, and we maintain it. You can go visit it. And you just picture the 3 sisters, the 2 children, the father, and the housekeeper. That's crowded enough. And then they invite him to stay with them. No problem. So all these circumstances, very, very different, and he was perfectly at peace and perfectly happy with all of them. And that's the way we have to learn to be. And sometimes you go to a country where there are many people that are a lot poorer than they are in the United States. And while you see some of them that are very unhappy and miserable, some of them you see are very cheerful and very happy. They're living very simple lives, and they're very happy with it. And so we have to learn to be happy and peaceful in all possible circumstances. All right.
When a man has thus realized that ignorance has nothing to do with him, that misfortune has nothing to do with him, when he's realized his true nature and knows that he is all perfect, all powerful, that misery or ignorance has no power to approach him, then nothing can touch his purity, his perfection, and wherever he goes, he's happy. Then he does not talk much. Why do we talk? We talk to learn. But he has nothing to learn. So he has no need to talk, and he therefore becomes a Mauni, or silent one. If he talks at all, he says a few words merely to teach and help others. Nothing will ever be able to rattle his mind. He may have to drudge under a hard master, or may be placed on a splendid throne, but he remains unmoved because he knows that compared to that light, the sun is but a flickering flame. Compared to that bliss, these fleeting pleasures are as foolishness. Just as a farthing has no attraction for a millionaire, to him it is as nothing. So the things of this world are as nothing to such a man, for he has found within himself an inexhaustible treasure, the treasure of eternal life, of eternal knowledge, infinite knowledge, and unending bliss.
All right. So, it's a good way to remember that we are just in a big drama. And so just as you would wholeheartedly pour yourself into a particular role, whether you're playing a peasant or you're playing Marie Antoinette and you're going to have your head chopped off, or whether you're playing Socrates, or whether you're playing some sort of peasant or a country bumpkin of some sort. It doesn't matter what part you're playing. You pour yourself into that part, but you're doing it with the knowledge that it's not you. That's the secret. You have to do it with the knowledge that you are the Atman. You are the infinite, undivided, unchanging, ever blissful, ever peaceful, ever knowing Atman, which is simply playing a role for the time being. All right, so with that thought, that ended that lecture, and we can begin next time with one called Man the Beggar. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.